Nothing in this podcast or on our website should be construed as medical advice. Consult your healthcare provider for your individual nutritional and medical needs. The information presented is based on our research and is strictly that of the author and not necessarily those of any professional group or other individual.
Hi, I'm Sue Becker from Bread Beckers. Welcome to Sue's Healthy Minutes. I'm so excited you've joined me today, and I hope this episode encourages you and allows you to find the answers you have been praying for the health of you and your family. Today, on Sue's Healthy Minutes, I will be sharing with you an interview that I did earlier this year. I was actually the one being interviewed. It's always encouraging to me to meet other people who are as passionate as I am about helping others find renewed health and energy. Earlier this year, I had the pleasure of meeting two such women. A mutual friend connected us. Dr. Bobby and Dr. Jess are physical therapists that share their wisdom with others through their podcast, Two Gals and a Glass Half Full. I was honored to be asked to be on their show. We did the video interview through Zoom, and at times the internet connection would come and go, making parts of it difficult to understand. But Tiffany Thompson, my amazing podcast producer, has edited some, saying that the contents are just too good not to share. If you want to watch the full video, you can find the link in today's podcast description. But today, I hope you enjoy listening to my time with Dr. Bobby and Dr. Jess from Two Gals and a Glass Half Full.
We have a special guest with us today. Her name is Sue. All right, so Sue, tell us a little bit about you.
All right. Well, I'm a wife, a mother, and a grandmother. I live in Cherokee County, Georgia. And a little bit about my background. I graduated from the University of Georgia. Go Dogs. Sorry, got to put that in there. I graduated with a degree in food science. I wasn't a pre-med student because I loved physiology and biochemistry, but I realized I didn't want that much of a grueling profession, and I didn't want to be in school that long, even though I love studying. But I graduated with a degree in food science, but had a strong background, of course, in physiology and biochemistry. I love studying the human body. After graduating, I met my husband at the University of Georgia, but after graduating, I did work at Kraft Foods for almost 5 years as a microbiologist there. But even after graduating, I often laugh and say I am a better student since I'm not in school than when I was in school. I just loved studying, and I continued to study and read the works of a popular biochemist of the 70s and 80s, Adele Davis, and I didn't sell back my biochemistry and physiology books, and I just kept reading and studying, and I believed in eating real food. And even though wasn't as clean as I could be and as I am now, but I just kind of came at everything from the standpoint, if the body's not working, we're probably not getting a nutrient that we need or nutrients that we need as a whole. And I don't mean to oversimplify, but my analogy is kind of like if our car kind of toast to a stop and we toast off to the side of the road, the first thing we look at is what? The gas gauge. We don't immediately go, probably my car needs a special surgeon and $900 worth of, with the first thing we think of is what we're feeding it. And that's kind of my jumping off place. I know it's not always that simple, but that's kind of where I began. And so I had a passion for eating real food, feeding my family healthy. When I started having children, I became a little more committed to that. And we just always seemed to eat real food. And I'm Southern. I tell people I grew up Southern. We cooked. There were no box mixes in my house and packages of prepared cookies and things like that. So I cooked. So that was a natural thing for me. But as my family grew, we had a lot of the same issues, health issues, the ear infections, the snotty noses and things like that. And then I had some issues that I just thought was life, but I fed my family real food with the exception of our bread, which I still bought like whole wheat bread from the store, or I bought whole wheat flour and tried to make bread out of that. But that didn't work so well. So in 1991, though, with my reading and studying, I came across a medical journal entitled How to Greatly Reduce the Risk of Common Diseases. In that journal, the history of white flour was presented, and then a brief discussion on the common diseases that plague America and how it was directly related to the white flour and commercially processed bread that most Americans were consuming. This information made total sense to me. Now, food science, I better clarify. That is not a nutrition degree. That is not a home ec degree. That is the study of food processing, food chemistry, food technology. Some of it great, how to prevent food poisoning and things like that, proper handling, and the microbiology aspect that I kind of focused on, the food fermentation and things like that. So my background in some ways was great, but I must have missed the bread class. This information was like lights went off and kind of like, why did I never put these pieces of the puzzle together before? And maybe I just never knew there was an option of milling your own flour. Flour is something you buy at the store. Bread is something you buy at the store. But when I read this information, I knew that it was scientifically correct and biblically correct. I'm a Christian, and so I look at things from both perspectives. So we bought a grain mill, and I began to make all of our own bread. And from that information, I learned that whole grains, real whole grains, are storable. They're the most nutrient-dense food God has given us, but only when that flour is freshly milled and eaten with all the components there do we get all of the nutrients God intended us to get from it. So I knew this was real, bought a grain mill, came into our home, and you're going to find out, you're probably going to realize before the end of this talk, I'm very passionate, and I can talk forever on this subject, and I'm very passionate about it. But, that was 32 years ago. This was in 1991, and I'm still as passionate today as I was then, because that grain mill came into our home. It was the only change in our diet we made at the time. Mind you, we were already eating real food, except for our bread. The health of our family changed drastically, very noticeably, and very immediate, especially to me. Now, I don't know how TMI information, you go with this, but that mill came in, I milled the flour, I made the bread, and I pooped the next morning. That was huge, and I had struggled with constipation all my life, just common, that everybody struggles with this because you hear people talking about it. Outside of chemical laxatives, I didn't want to do that. I tried natural things, but nothing really worked that well or consistently. But eat this bread, and that is no longer a problem because all of the fiber is there. So that was a big plus for me. And I tell people, I can tell you now, it's 32 years. I've never been constipated again. So I know people want to know that. But, and then I began to notice my energy levels. I had 5 young children when I started. I went on to have number 6 and number 7 later. I now have 9 children and my 16th grandchild on the way. But, I began to notice that I just had more energy. I homeschooled my kids, so they were here all day with me, and that can be tiring. They're a blessing, but it can be tiring. So I noticed I had more energy. I noticed that even though we weren't junky eaters, I didn't crave sugary things. I didn't have to have that chocolate or that cookie. It just didn't matter anymore. And then one of the biggest things was my sinus congestion went completely away. Being chronically constipated, I was also chronically just congested. I could make it through the day all right, but at night, it would just all stop up. I couldn't breathe, so I couldn't sleep. So I'd have to take an antihistamine. All of that went away in the first month. And,
oh, wow.
And so it was amazing. One of my children's warts went away, and that may be too long of a story for today, but it's powerful because warts are caused by a virus. And that is probably one of our number one testimonies over the last 32 years is hundreds of wart testimonies that within just a week or so or a month, their warts go away and it's a virus. So this was all in the first month. So I became an avid believer. I began to make bread for other people. The next thing I knew, they were calling me saying, you teach me how to make bread and I feel better, or this happened. A great testimony, which was kind of the first on my journey, was a lady called, and she called me, and her testimony was, it's the bread. It's got to be the bread. That's how they start their conversation with me. And she goes, that's all I changed. And my cholesterol dropped 85 points in just 1 month.
Wow.
And that was a testimony I didn't have. My testimonies, I searched my biochemistry and physiology books and figured out why is this happening, but that one was one I didn't have. So that really led me on a journey. Anytime someone would share a testimony with me, I would go to my physiology books, my biochemistry books, and I would go, what is in this bread that to make someone's cholesterol drop 85 points in a month? And I found out it's all there. And it's all missing from commercially processed bread. So that led me on a journey. And like I said, after people began to see the same health benefits, because I was baking bread for them. And that was what really opened the door to starting our company, the Bread Beckers, was because I was, by this point I had 6 children. I was making bread for all these other people and all the bread for my family. And that was a lot. 6 loaves of bread twice a week, mixed in with muffins and pancakes and, homeschooling and laundry and children. I was busy. And one weary day, I met my husband in the driveway and said, I don't think I'm supposed to make bread for the world. I think I'm supposed to teach the world to make bread for themselves. So that started our ministry and our business, Bread Beckers, where we provide grain and grain mills and everything to make bread from freshly milled flour. So that's kind of my story, and the rest is history. We started in our tiny little home that you can even see in the background here, and in 1992, and then in 1998 we had outgrown our home and doing business just as ourselves. So we incorporated and we moved into a 10,000 square foot warehouse in Woodstock, Georgia, where we have a huge classroom. And then now we have a secondary warehouse where we bring in grain by the truckloads and package it down for home use. And so that's our story. And we're just excited. We have thousands of testimonies of people's improved health. And it blesses me every day. I started a podcast recently, and a lot of it is just interviewing people, and their testimony is, it's the bread. So it's exciting.
So one of the ladies that works with me, she trained with you. And
yes.
So she was really into it. And that's how, and she's continued to make her own bread, and it does freshly milled grains. That's all she'll do. And so she then raised awareness about your stuff to one of my neighbors who needs to be gluten-free. And so she now is milling her own stuff to do gluten-free bread. And she's got a small little, so she kind of makes for some of the neighbors and stuff like that, gluten-free as well. And so I buy my bread from her, so it's freshly milled grain. For what you've gotten out there as far as like education is like, it just continues to roll.
It does.
So what you started then has affected my family. Now that's the bread we eat, is freshly milled grain bread. And like I said, ours is gluten-free. Like I said, because of some of the sensitivities we have in our home, but it's really, as we've cleaned up what we're eating, bread was a big missing link. It is easy to eat not easy. Like it's work to eat a whole food diet, right? Like you put the box, shove it and heat it up. There's work and preparation that goes into it.
Yeah.
The bread part though, is that was definitely a missing link for us as well. So when it comes to like doing the grains, right? And you're milling it. What are some of like the like common mistakes that people make? Like when they're first getting started and they're like, all right, I'm going to mill my own grain. Like, what are some of like the common mishaps?
I don't know of really any mishaps. I think the confusion sometimes when you tell somebody you mill your own grain it was always funny in the early days when I would take bread somewhere. Somebody'd say, oh, I want your recipe. And I'm like, okay, you can have my recipe, but I mill my own grain. And the comment would always be 2 things. You do what? And I'm like, I mill my own grain. So I think that's the thing, just the recognition that this can be done. You don't have to be stuck with buying store-bought flour. So I know that's not so much a mishap because I can't really think of any mishaps. But then the other thing, people go, the second question people would ask me after you do what? They would go, where do you live? And I didn't understand that. It was always so funny. And finally it hit me that I think they were picturing in their mind a barn and an ox and a big stone mill or a water wheel. Maybe they even thought I was the ox going around in a circle. I don't know. But I think that's a misconception, is the grain mill is just this tiny little mill that sits on my counter. You turn it on, you pour the grain in, and it comes out flour in 30 seconds or less, enough to make bread or pancakes or muffins or whatever. So I think that's probably a misconception. And like me, I didn't know that was possible. I was just buying bread from the store. I think another misconception is people think it's hard and it's time consuming and I don't have time for this or whatever. And it's really easy. And I understand as Americans, I think a lot of us have moved away from cooking. We're so eating out and buying prepared stuff and prepared meals. So I get that. I tell people, if you don't know there's a room in your house called a kitchen, you might have a little trouble. But if you already cook and bake and know where the kitchen is and know how to read a recipe, I mean, it's easy. It really, really is. And that's what I think our company, the Bread Beckers, that's what we're so passionate about, is coming alongside of people and walking you through the process of just pour your grain in, and grains are storable, but once that flour is milled, nutrients begin to oxidize. I think that's what we're here to help people understand. And you know what? I know Southerners don't make yeast bread too much. My mother was very Southern. And when I started making bread, I tried to get her to get into it. She's like, no, yeast bread scares me, like that, But fast and easy. Anybody can do that. I whipped them up yesterday or Sunday before I went to church, whip them up in 5 minutes. They bake in 15 to 20 and boom, in less than 30 minutes, you have muffins. And also I think when I say bread, it doesn't have to be a loaf of yeast bread. It can be a muffin, a pancake. It can be a pot of brown rice and black-eyed peas. It can be oatmeal. It can be grits. Anything from a grain or a bean is the key. So I know that I don't know of too many mishaps. I think they have the most trouble probably with yeast bread. That's what we get the most questions about. Mm-hmm. And that's why I'm like, just get the yeast bread, make the muffins and pancakes, if that's what it takes.
I have no idea what milled even was.
Yep. It means buying the grain whole and intact. And grains are storable, and milling it when you're ready to use it. Once the bread is baked, the nutritional loss is minimal, but it's that flour. Here's what I learned that was in that journal that absolutely blew me away. And like I said, I just thought the things I was struggling with was just the way of life. I didn't know there could be a difference. And what happened is grains are storable. They always have been left whole and intact. All the nutrients are contained inside. The bran has the outer surface, and it has all kinds of vitamins and minerals and protein and fiber. The germ is the interior part, and that's where the little sprout comes from. That's got your vitamin E, fatty acids. A lot of people are all on about eating, getting your essential fatty acids and don't realize that seeds have those. Grains and beans have fatty acids there. And then everything else is the white flour portion is endosperm. That's what it's called. But it's little packets of protein and starch. That's all white flour is for all practical purposes. Well, when you mill this grain into flour, all those oils, all those vitamins, all those minerals are exposed to the air, and oxidation begins to take place. And most of the oxidation takes place in the first few days shortly after milling. Those oils will go rancid. And just like we know that oils go rancid, right? Nuts, crackers go, anything with a fat or oil will go rancid. So flour spoiled. That's why the mills were located next to the wheat fields once upon a time prior to the 1900s. But in the late 1800s, was discovered that the bran and germ, when you mill it into flour, stays kind of coarse. so they could sift those parts away and leave only the white flour, the protein and starch. Now they had a flour that wouldn't spoil. This led to the invention of these huge steel rolling mills that could crush the grain, produce massive volumes of white flour. And this all happened in the late 1800s, early 1900s. By 1910, white flour, white bread was the food for the masses in our country. The local millers went out of business, and all the mills moved out to the wheat fields, because now it didn't matter. If you shipped the flour across the country and it took months to get there, the white flour wouldn't spoil. But here's what happened. And what most of us don't realize is that prior to the 1900s, most of the bread was baked at home. Either you had the capacity to mill your own flour or you got it from the local miller. But also something else happened. When this white flour came on the market and became food for the masses, this was the first time in history this had happened. White flour, white bread, was reserved for wealthy people, people that had servants or designated bakers, to make the bread for them. And they found ways to sift the bran and germ out, not as much as we do today, but it would make fluffier, whiter bread. But that was wealthy. The poor people looked with envy at the rich people's white bread. But in 1910, when those steel rolling mills became commonplace, white flour, white bread, hallelujah, everybody loved it. But here's what they didn't expect. 3 diseases became epidemic at the time, and I'm talking huge issues. Beriberi is a vitamin B1 deficiency, began to plague Americans. Pellagra, which is one I've studied pretty extensively, that's a vitamin B3 or niacin deficiency. And that is skin eruptions. I mean, it's horrible, like oozing, burning sores on your nose. It's called the disease of the 4 Ds, pellagra is. Dermatitis, so skin eruptions, dysentery, so horrible, horrendous bowel issues, and dementia, horrible mental issues. And the southeastern United States was particularly plagued by pellagra. In fact, the first case of pellagra was diagnosed right here in Atlanta, Georgia. Can't remember if it was 1902 or 1905. I need to go back and write that in my notes, but it was 30,000 cases in the first year. Huh. And one article I read said that the mental institutions in Georgia and South Carolina were literally overflowing because they did not have enough beds to house the patients. And death is the final D of pellagra. And then the third disease that was epidemic was anemia because of the minerals missing in the bran and the bran and germ offered to the bread and the flour products. Puzzled health officials all over the country till they finally traced it to the missing nutrients in the bran and germ. Because like I said, the white flour, virtually protein and starch, and that's what we need. We need those proteins, those amino acids, but God never intended us to eat it without the fiber and nutrient-rich bran and germ. So they urged the millers to put the bran and germ back in the flour, but the millers were unwilling. At that point, they had discovered a very lucrative business for the byproducts. I love the food industry when they call the byproducts the good stuff, They were selling that to the cattle feed industry, and that is still done today. The cattle get the bran and germ or animal feed of all kinds, and it's now done all around the world because the world wants to live and eat like the rich Americans. And I've seen it in other countries. We have ministries, and I've seen bran and germ in the marketplace in Haiti where people are starving. When I asked the young man what that was, he said, that's pig feed. And I'm like, well, all righty then, and so, the millers were unwilling to lose that lucrative market. So it took until 1948. Now, mind you, this is 1905, 1910. They're seeing these diseases, but it took until 1948. The government then mandated that the flour be enriched. And I think that was what, as a food scientist, deceived me, because I read that label as, we're doing something so good to this bread and this flour. We're making it better than it would have been had we not enriched it for the people. That is such a deceptive terminology, deceived even me. And I didn't mean that arrogantly. That sounded kind of, but someone that has studied nutrition, it never clicked until I read this. For the 35 to 40 nutrients, and really more, that probably, because some haven't even been isolated or named, that are lost when you take the bran and germ away, they put 4 back in to enrich the flour. And of course, no fiber, never vitamin E. So what was put back in? 3 B vitamins and iron, supposedly to stop beriberi and pellagra. But I always have to ask myself this question, and others when I'm speaking, is how many nervous disorders do we have in our country today? How many skin eruptions? How much bowel disturbances, mental insanity, anemia? Anemia is a big problem. So they put it back in, and that supposedly stopped those diseases. It took until 1998, 50 years of watching the rising incidence of birth defects, for the government to mandate that folic acid be added back to the flour. And why was bread chosen to add these nutrients to? Because that's where we lost it from. That's where it was removed from. So they had to add it back. But here, it didn't just stop there. The residual oils in the white flour cause the flour to turn yellow and have these little specks in it. Can't have yellow flour. We want it whiter than white. So what did the food industry begin to do? Use a chlorine derivative product to bleach it. Did you hear what I'm saying? Here we're bleaching our flour with a chlorine derivative. And a product called nitrogen trichloride was used for more than 25 years until they discovered that it caused seizures and hyperactivity in dogs. In a matter of 2 weeks, some of the dogs died because they were so frantic they wouldn't even stop and eat. And when I read that in 1991, that was the beginning of the whole phenomenon of ADD and hyperactivity. Now, nitrogen trichloride was taken off the market, but a chlorine derivative is still being used today. And benzoyl peroxide is used, which destroys B vitamins and calcium and vitamin E. These are things that causes respiratory issues. Potassium bromate is a flour enhancer because, every bag of white flour has to give consistent results. And so they have to condition it. And it's known to cause liver and thyroid issues. And we wonder why more than 50% of women particularly have thyroid issues. And yet we're blaming, and wheat is getting a really bad rap. We're blaming wheat for everything when here's the problem. That stuff that's in the store, that down the bread aisle, the cereal aisle, the cracker aisle, that maybe came from wheat, but that is not wheat. Wheat is one of the most nutrient-dense foods and grains and beans that God has given us. And I honestly don't think you can be healthy without it because it provides so many nutrients. If you did a nutritional study of the individual vitamins and minerals, you would start seeing wheat germ, wheat bran as major food source. And we're doing ourselves a terrible disservice of not eating grains and beans.
I think it's really important to understand when we're putting something in our body, what are we putting in our body?
Yeah.
That is what we're directly absorbing. And that's how our body functions. So like the way I was speaking with this functional medicine doctor, and she had a really cool outlook on how our system works. Like our skin works to protect us from the outside, right? So that's our barrier from the outside. But we have, an opening and an exit. We introduce the outside to our body. And so what we're putting in our opening is really important because that's a decision that we're having to make every single time we eat or drink of like, what is that going to do for us? And like you said, when we aren't getting all of the nutrients that we need to get, our body isn't going to operate. So instead we take these multivitamins that, what's in those?
Yeah. Well, and that's just like the nutrients, the vitamins and iron that they enrich the flour with. Those are synthetically produced. And, the B vitamins are a huge complex, a huge family of vitamins. And they only put 3 back in. Well, now a 4th, folic acid is considered one. And from my studies, when you take one without the other consistently, it creates a whole other realm. And then the other thing, fiber, for years was thought to not be really any nutritional value because it wasn't digested. But what we put in, yes, fuels our body if we can get those nutrients from it. But then the stuff our body says that's trash, take it out. That fiber absorbs it, dumps it in our big trash can known as our large intestine or our colon to be eliminated. And if we're not eliminating every day at least, and I tell people one good bowel movement a day is the absolute minimum. If you're eating 3 times a day, you should have a bowel movement 3 times a day. And fruits and vegetables are wonderful, high in minerals and enzymes and soluble fiber, but your grains and beans, very nutrient dense, but also soluble and insoluble fiber. And that really helps keep our bodies clean and toxin free. You know, we talk a lot about, breathing toxins and getting rid of stuff in our homes and not putting toxins on our skin. And that is wonderful, but we got to eat the right foods to get what is coming into our body and what our body says doesn't want to get it eliminated. And if we're not, and that was one thing I learned when I told you my sinus congestion went away. Well, that was directly related to my constipation. And I think people don't realize that. Now, I know there's seasonal allergies and things like that, but mine was strictly from me not having a bowel movement every day, getting rid of the toxins. If you're not eliminating that stuff every day, then your colon, those toxins are sitting there in your colon. They get reabsorbed into your body. And one of your responses of your body to toxins is to make mucus. So you can blow it out of your nose. So you can get rid of it. That's another elimination station. Our skin, we sweat it out. Have you ever eaten like garlic or, been around there and you feel it. And, we're getting rid of those things. So those are mechanisms that we've never connected to not eliminating every day. Do you ever think about why when you get a cold, you get a snotty nose? It's your body's trying to get rid of either the organism, the virus, or the toxin that organism has produced. So you can cough it up. So what did I do when I had a snotty nose and couldn't sleep at night? I took a antihistamine. What does that do? Does that make it start pouring out my nose? No, it dries it up right where it is. So I was just in this treadmill or revolving door that I couldn't get off of. And once my bowel started eliminating every day, all of that went away. And I haven't had an antihistamine or a decongestant in 32 years. Most of America lives on them. And that alone is pretty exciting to me and freeing. Even if I get a cold, and I'm not going to say I never get sick, but even if I do get a cold, I get over it quickly and I never need medication. And I'm not saying don't take medication because there's a place for it, but I typically don't have such sinus congestion. It runs, it drains, I blow it out. I do what my body was designed by God to do. That's a big part of our body's makeup that I think we sometimes don't make that connection.
Yeah, we don't want to feel uncomfortable. So instead of understanding what is my body feeling, is it supposed to be feeling, and is it something that I just need to get through? But the minute that something is just a little bit uncomfortable, we're going to jump and mask it because that's what we've been taught to do. And I mean, in physical therapy, we do this all the time with patients where we're trying to help them understand if you feel this, you've got knowledge to do something about it. Maybe it's something that you shouldn't be doing. Maybe it's changing how you're doing it. Whatever it might be, it's your body's way of communicating. And so when we better listen to how our body's communicating to us, we can really drive with intention our next step. Yeah. So if you have a migraine headache and you're vomiting, obviously treat that.
Exactly.
But if you're dehydrated and you feel the headache coming on, drink a lot of water, put your body temperature down and see how that does. So it's telling you I need something. So there's different times where it's treat the symptom. Other times, give the body what it's asking for because that's what it's trying to tell you.
Kind of like the oil light in your car. It's telling you to put oil in there. There's
something.
You don't go in there and unplug the wire because that light's bothering you. Put in there. So I know. And you're right. I mean, times, and I'm not going to say, there's never a time for medication or anything like that. I would never say that, but it's fewer and farther between. Like I said, I haven't had an antihistamine in 32 years. I don't even know where a bottle of Advil or ibuprofen is. I think I might have a little one in the cabinet. It's probably expired. I don't know, because exactly like you said, if you get a headache a little bit, you're like, am I dehydrated? Am I stressed? Have I not eaten? Is my blood sugar going crazy? And that's another big thing with the bread. And that's a myth that diabetics should stay away from bread. Yeah, the stuff in the store. Absolutely. Because that has all the fiber taken out, lots of sugar added to it. So yeah, that's going to shoot up your blood sugar. But remember, I said in the beginning, one of the first things I noticed was I had more energy. Well, whole grains and beans, because of the fiber, they're the complex carbohydrates that they are. They're broken down more slowly into the sugars that your brain needs, that your body needs. That's our body's source of energy. And sugar is like, oh, it's evil. Well, it's what our body lives off of, not the white, pure drug that we mainline today with soft drinks and the processed food out there. But so when those carbohydrates are broken down, that release of sugar comes on more slowly, the sugars that your brain needs, the sugar that your body needs for energy. And so you just get this steady source of energy, and you don't get those spikes in your blood sugar. And then insulin's overproduced, and then you get this drastic drop, and now you're shaking, and hypoglycemic, and I need a Coke, I need a candy bar, I need something to get my blood sugar up. And most people are living like that day in and day out. I don't do caffeine. I don't need caffeine because I just have this steady flow of energy. And when I feel really, really tired, if possible, I rest. If not, I drink water and my adrenaline kicks in like it's supposed to. And I do the battle that I need to do that day. And then I make sure I get rest. And, and that's another thing. People are living on caffeine. And I don't think we realize that the way caffeine works is it stimulates adrenaline to be produced, and adrenaline causes your body to uptake sugar. So that's why when that adrenaline, that party is over and the mess is in the kitchen, you go, I can't do this. I can't face the day. It's because that blood sugar has dropped and you're shaking, and people don't realize that. And I'm not saying my parents drank a cup of coffee in the morning. That's not an evil, bad thing. But the way people are having to have caffeine just to get through the day, they're not realizing that what it's doing, shooting up, dropping down, shooting. And so they get down here, they got to have another drink or fixed or energy drink or something. And it's sad. It's really saddens me to see what's happening in our country.
It's not necessary. So I think there's people like you, there's other resources that are out there, which is we're trying to shed some light on. And that way people can gain some knowledge. So if you want to learn more about you and how to make bread, what's the best place, or not just bread, but like freshly milled bread, they can make their stuff at home. Where would be the best place for them to go for them?
So our website is breadbeckers.com. You can go to our website and find lots of products. We also have a YouTube channel, Bread Beckers YouTube channel, lots of classes. And that's probably our number one thing you can find. I've done a long video, but it's Real Bread, the Staff of Life, where I go into all the hours of research that I did on cancer, heart disease, cholesterol, diabetes, constipation. So it's all there. So that's a great learning experience. But then to watch the classes and see, and we have a Facebook page and an Instagram page. And then just last year, I started a podcast called Sue's Healthy Minutes. And lots of testimonies on there. But if you start back from the beginning, it'll be a lot of the nutritional information. So that's where you can find us, breadbeckers.com, Sue's Healthy Minutes, and Siri and Alexa will pull it up for you if you just tell them to. And then, of course, our YouTube channel, Bread Beckers on YouTube, and lots of videos. And best thing for them to do when they go to our website, breadbeckers.com, to sign up for our email newsletter. And we only send out one a month. We don't inundate your inbox with emails because I'm the one that writes the newsletters and I'm usually behind the deadline. But you'll get where I'm speaking. You'll get cooking classes coming up. And we've now started live streaming of those classes. So even if you're out of town, You can watch them, but we also have people that drive from all over to come to our classes. They're pretty amazing. And they're so economically priced. I mean, $20, $30, $10 to watch it online. And and lots of articles will come out, recipes and things like that. We just want to come alongside of you and show you this is a doable lifestyle change. And honestly, the best and most important lifestyle change as far as eating goes that I've ever seen. I've never seen one food make this many changes in people's lives. So we just want to help you along the way. You can do it.
Sue's Healthy Minutes podcast has been a presentation by the Beckers Incorporated located in Woodstock, Georgia. For more information, store hours, and learning opportunities, visit breadbeckers.com and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Make sure to subscribe to this podcast and never miss an episode. Share this with 2 friends who would benefit from this information, and be sure to join us again next week for more of Sue's Healthy Minutes.